When it comes to the Peavey 5150, there's a version we often overlook and forget. This is the combo version. In the mid-1990s, Eddie goes back to Peavey and engineer James Brown and says, I want to take my flagship tone and put it in a version that kids can walk into a store and be able to purchase. So he wanted a more affordable version of the 5150. Story goes that James Brown spent a lot of years working to get the original 5150 right for Eddie because he was really demanding, and Eddie didn't spare him with the combo either. He could have phoned it in, could have grabbed the cash and run to the bank laughing, but that's not what he did. Some of the mods they came up with eventually influenced all the 5150 models that came afterwards. If you're interested in this topic, my name is Jonathan. This is TL Toneworks Podcast. And let's get started. So I spent the last 2 weeks researching the Peavey 5150 combo version and trying to get all the details right. A video I came upon is an older podcast episode from Tone Talk. That's Dave Friedman's podcast. And he had James Brown on there. And there's a specific section in the podcast where they're talking about the combo version. So a lot of the information I'm going to be sharing with you comes directly from James Brown and him validating a lot of these facts. The first one is that the combo is not just the head split in wattage right in half and stuck directly into a combo. It's actually way more complicated than that. And I'm laughing because when you hear him talk about it, it sounds rather grueling. But if you're going to be working with a legend and they're very demanding about tone, you have to expect that. So basically, James Brown kind of makes the first iterations of the combo, sends it to Eddie, and Eddie is used to cranking the crap out of his amp. So he's grabbing the combo, cranking it all the way. He doesn't like it. It feels loose. It doesn't sound that great. And he has a pretty a pretty high demand if you really think about it, because he wants the 2x12 to feel like a 4x12. So it needs to push air and it needs to have that girthy low end, but out of a 2x12 combo. So obviously they're making the amp rather high. So if you ever look at these amplifiers, they're pretty tall. If you open them up, there's a lot of room in the cab and they are heavy as hell. So not a comfortable bus ride with your guitar and combo. If you're ever thinking this is just a grab and go amp, this is not it. So they go about tweaking this, and eventually they get together and James does 3 modifications. He doesn't really go into details about all of them. Obviously, they're removing tubes to make it a 60 watt, and then he switches some values around, and eventually Eddie's like, that's it. Now the amp sounds tighter, so not as loose. And there's something about the quality of the amp that feels more like a 412 to Eddie. And Eddie apparently says to James, like, wow, you can do that? And James is like, yeah. He's like, why didn't you do that for the original head? And James is like, well, when you told me it was perfect, I didn't want to mess with that anymore. Like, I didn't want to get it wrong. Eddie liked that tweak so much that he had his personal 5150s modded so that they reacted more like the combo. And eventually, Peavey and Eddie come out with the 5152, which was, in essence, inspired by the modifications that they got out of the combo version. What's so different about these combos? If you compare them to the original head being the block letter version or the signature version, obviously it's 60 watts, so it's half the rating, but it also uses different transformers. The control panels are on top as opposed to the front. So eventually when Peavey redid the combo after Eddie left, they took those control panels and put them on the front. But when Eddie was there, so the original iteration, he wanted the control panels on top. There's spring reverb on board. It isn't one of those cavernous reverbs, something that you would find, let's say, in a Vox or a Fender. It's very subdued. It's kind of bright, but it sits right behind your guitar signal, so very usable. The cab is made of 11-ply birch, just like the original head cabinet. So the casing for the head versions were made with 11-ply birch. This contributes, obviously, to the weight of the amplifier, which I'm going to be talking in just a second. The original speaker was a Sheffield designed speaker that used Mueller-made cones. So basically, they were getting the parts and making the speakers in-house. Some people hate them. Some people love them. Apparently, Eddie was using those live and didn't have any issues with them. Most people swapped them out. It has 5 12AX7 preamp tubes and 2 6L6 GC power tubes. And the weight is 85 pounds. So we're talking like Vox AC30 style weight, especially if you consider like the AC30 with the blue, the Alnico blue. This is the kind of weight we're talking about. Mine here was modded by the previous owner, and it has casters, and I'm rather grateful for that. Because, yeah, I'm a strong dude, but eventually, you know, the strength kind of sucks out of you when you got to hauler this thing around. So, yeah, definitely a point of consideration. It does have the green and the red channel. So the green is supposed to be a little cleaner than what you would find on the heads. I've heard examples online, and I'm not finding that it's a huge difference. But as you heard in the clean tone that it did, if you use the BBE Sonic Stomp, you're going to get much nicer cleans out of it. It is kind of hissy as an amplifier, whether you're using the clean or the dirty. So that's something to consider. A lot of people might want to put some kind of noise gate through the effects loop to reduce that noise. It's really a personal preference. In a band context with these amps loud, that hiss kind of becomes negligible. Eddie was very demanding of the original 5150, and he was also demanding of the combo. But to be demanding, you have to take these out on the road or use them in the studio or both. You really need to know what the product can do. The mid-90s wasn't 2005. There weren't cell phone cameras that could film. There weren't like 200 people in the audience filming the event. There was only a handful of people with camcorders. Those were rather expensive, and back in the day, you would have had to sneak them in. So there's a few videos. If you look up Van Halen Balance Tour 1995, if you're patient, as I was, so I spent half a day just skimming through all the videos, trying to find video evidence of Eddie using them live. You will notice that during the Balance Tour, Eddie was using a mixture of the full stack or the combos. So it'd be one or the other. There's not a whole lot of instances where you can see the combo, but you have to keep in mind there weren't a whole lot of people filming these because, like I said, there weren't any cell phones where you could just take it out of your pocket and film. So maybe he did use them extensively, but finding that evidence is hard. And like audience pictures, that was also another thing. You had to take like a camera and take a picture. Some of these might have never made it online because they're in someone's photo album somewhere. I'm not sure about studio work. Some people speculate that he did. Some people are very convinced that he did. Sadly, I could not find pictures. Maybe some people have those pictures. What we need is like a one-stop shop, somewhere where you could go and find all the evidence about the combo, because I find that the combo is very undocumented, if you will. There's not much resource out there, and what is out there is kind of like all over the place, and you need to do what I did, which is to spend hours looking that stuff up. Sometimes you end up in a dead end. You can't find it, so you have to reframe how you research the evidence you're looking for. I would love to see pictures of Eddie in the studio using them. So I don't know if any of you have seen them. If you have, let me know where to find that information. Maybe eventually I'll do an update on this video. In 1992, I walk into a Safeway grocery, and they had a section there where they had magazines and books. I don't know if they still do, but back in the day, they had a section there. And I see this thing. This is the copy I bought in 1992. I'm like, it's all about Eddie Van Halen. Whoa, what the hell, So I open up first page, and what do I see? The full stack. I didn't even know he was going to have his own signature amp, much less his own signature guitar. And the guitars were making me flip out because I love Telecasters. Even back then I was in love with Tellies, and these kind of reminded me of a mixture between the Telly and the Les Paul. So I'm looking at the guitar, I'm looking at this crazy full stack amp. I run back home, literally run, I'm winded, I'm like, I need that magazine before they run out. They only had like 2 or 3 copies. Back then they sold for $5.50. That might not be super relevant to you, but for me, as a broke kid, this was a lot of money. So I buy this, I come back home, I show it to my dad, and my dad, being a country guy, he played guitar, but he was more of a country guy. He couldn't give a shit about Van Halen. So I'm like, Dad, I want to try that amp. Like, I'm pretty sure this is going to be my amp. And he's like, sure. So first thing I do is I go to my local music store, Shiam, I think it was called Shiam Music in Chilliwack back in the 1990s. It was on the main street. So I go there, and they don't have a 5150. They had a lot of crates and stuff like that, like Dean Markley, but they didn't have a 5150. It took many months before my dad and I went with one of his buddies to in Vancouver, which was just about an hour away or so from where I lived. And back then there was a music store called West Coast Music. I don't know if they're still around. I didn't bother to look up. It's just something that's coming back to me now. So we walk into West Coast Music, and the first thing they have right there on the left when you come into the music store was that full stack. And I'm losing my shit. I'm telling my dad, we need to take off with this. We had loaded some gear in the car just in case we came upon something I would like, because I wanted to trade for something that I wanted to play. So my dad's looking at this, talking with the guy, and the guy wouldn't budge. Like, the amps were too brand new. And you have to keep in mind, in 1992, the old gear that is vintage now and everyone's paying like tens of thousands for, back then they were junk. There's no better way to say it. I came in with a Fender, I think it was early 60s reverb tank. I had a Fender Tremolux. I had a 1972 Fender Telecaster, Swamp Ash body, and some other stuff. We had a lot of what is called now vintage. Back then it was just old shit you could find at a pawn shop for not that much money. And the guy wasn't interested. So the only thing I came home with that day was a Fender, not a Fender, but a Marshall Super Lead. I traded the reverb tank for a Marshall Super Lead, and I still have the receipt from West Coast Music. Nowadays, that's considered ridiculous, but back then they had a floor. Like, all the heads, the Marshall heads were on the floor, stacked. There was a huge discount. Like, they were trying to get rid of them. They couldn't get rid of them fast enough. Nowadays, those would be like, you would have to ask to play them. They were just on the floor. They didn't care. So yeah, I didn't get my my 5150. I got something closer to the original Van Halen sound, but I didn't know that back then. I didn't know squat about gear. Fast forward to 3 years ago. So we're talking 2023. I'm well into my 40s by that point, and I live in Belgium because my wife had a contract in Belgium for 4 years. So we moved from Canada, we get in Belgium, and I see the classified ads, and some guy is selling that amp for 450 euros. I'm like, what? So I contact him. He's like, oh yeah, I'll give it to you for 400. I'm like, okay. So I get to his house. It's in a barn. It's dirty. It's got like chicken poo on it. It's got cobwebs, but it's still functional. Like, I plugged into it. The pots are scratchy and all that. I'm like, okay, $400, great deal. He put casters on it, so he gigged with it since the mid-90s, and now he didn't play in a band anymore, and he was moving from Belgium to France, so he just wanted to get rid of this stuff as fast as he could. So I grabbed it, brought it home, cleaned it up, did everything I needed to it, and fell in love with the amp. I haven't featured it all that much on my channel because I've been more of a Vox-related channel since like 2018. So I didn't really see the point on doing a whole entire video on the 5150 combo. But I've been playing that amp now for about, I want to say about 4 months, just exclusively. I'm not even using distortion pedals or overdrive pedals anymore. I'm using the Vox for clean, and I'm using this amp in like a, almost like a wet dry. So I'm not quite at the point of having wet dry. So I have the 2 amps running simultaneously. So the Vox for clean and this for distortion. And I absolutely love the amp. Which brings me to this point. Eddie was one of those guitar players that was super influential, not just in how he played and the music he wrote, but with gear as well. And here you had a 16-year-old in 1992 who wanted the 5150, and that 16-year-old became a metalhead and, you know, eventually started to get back into blues and rock, classic rock stuff. And turns out that this amp is so versatile that it can cover just about all those styles, even like over 30 years later, which is mind-blowing because when you think about it, this amp was supposed to be his signature sound, but it's become almost the signature sound of metal since pretty much the 90s. And a lot of people have made that amp sound so drastically different. If you consider like deathcore and gent and stuff like that, sounds very different than, let's say, mid-90s death metal bands like Carcass, who apparently use this on Heartwork. And here I am, and you know, a middle-aged man now, and I'm still using this, but not for metal. I'm using it for some clean tones, some lightly overdriven tone. That really speaks to how well designed these amps were. And to kind of wrap this up for you, the reason why I wanted to do this video is that there are some very good videos showcasing the sound of these amps, but there's no love letter to the 5150 combo because most people focus on the block letter original Peavey 5150. But this one here, for me personally, really ticked all the boxes when it came to medium gain and high gain tones. And I would love to hear from you, especially for those of you who are fans of the 5150. Is there maybe another version of the 5150 that is completely overlooked? Maybe it's one of the 6505 versions that Peavey came out with after they parted with Eddie. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these amplifiers, and if there's something else that maybe it's a lunchbox version. Like there's quite a few versions by now of the 5150, and I would love to hear your thoughts so that maybe there's something I overlooked that I could look into, maybe borrowing an amp or purchasing an amp in the future so I can kind of do the same thing I did here today. So let me know what you think. In the meantime, there's another video appearing right here on screen. YouTube tells me you might enjoy this one, so click on that video, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Cheers.